The afternoon sun beat down on the parking lot of Miller's Bar and Grill in Coronado, California. It was the kind of place where military folks gathered after long days on base. The smell of burgers and barbecue drifted through the open windows, mixing with the salty ocean breeze from the nearby beach. Lieutenant Sarah Chen walked toward the entrance, still wearing her Navy uniform. She was 32 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun and calm brown eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. Her uniform bore the Navy SEAL Trident pin, something she'd earned through 24 months of brutal training that broke most men who attempted it. Sarah had just finished a 14-hour day working with her unit on tactical planning. She was tired, hungry, and looking forward to a quiet meal before heading home. She didn't want attention. She never did. But sometimes, attention found her anyway. As she reached for the door handle, she heard loud voices from inside. Through the window, she could see 5 Army soldiers sitting at a corner table. They wore their dress uniforms, ribbons displayed across their chests. They looked like they'd been drinking for a while, their faces red and their voices carrying across the restaurant. Sarah sighed. She recognized the type. Young soldiers, maybe in their mid-20s, full of pride and testosterone. On any other day, she would have turned around and gone somewhere else, but she was too tired to care. She pulled open the door and walked inside. The hostess, a young woman named Maria, smiled when she saw Sarah. "Lieutenant Chen, good to see you, your usual table." "That would be great, Maria, thank you." Sarah followed Maria toward a quiet booth near the back. As they passed the table with the 5 soldiers, one of them called out, "Hey, look at that. They're letting desk workers wear the Trident now." His friends laughed. Sarah kept walking, her face expressionless. She'd heard worse, much worse. But the soldier wasn't finished. He stood up, swaying slightly. "I'm serious. What do they have you do, honey? File paperwork, answer phones." His friends laughed harder. One of them, a stocky guy with a crew cut, added, "Probably got it as a participation trophy. You know how the Navy's gone soft." Sarah stopped. She turned slowly to face them. Her voice was quiet and controlled. "Excuse me." The first soldier, whose name tag read Morrison, grinned. "You heard me. Real SEALs are out there doing real work, not sitting in air-conditioned offices playing soldier." The restaurant had gone quiet. Other diners watched nervously. Maria looked frightened, unsure what to do. Sarah studied Morrison for a long moment. She could see the alcohol in his eyes, the bravado that came from too many beers and not enough sense. She could also see something else, insecurity. These young men were trying to prove something to each other, and she'd become their target. "I don't want any trouble," Sarah said calmly. "I just came here to eat." "Trouble?" Morrison laughed. "There's no trouble here, sweetheart. We're just having a conversation about how the standards have dropped, how they're letting anyone wear that pin now just to meet quotas." His friend with the crew cut stood up too. "Yeah, it's embarrassing, really. What's next? Giving out SEAL Tridents in cereal boxes." The other 3 soldiers at the table were laughing so hard they were pounding the table. Sarah felt the familiar weight of judgment, the same prejudice she'd faced her entire career. Being a woman in the military was hard enough. Being a female Navy SEAL was something else entirely. Only 40 women had ever completed SEAL training since the program opened to them. Sarah was one of them. She'd survived Hell Week, the most brutal 7 days of military training in existence. She'd swum in freezing ocean water until her body went numb. She'd carried telephone poles with her team until her shoulders bled. She'd completed missions in combat zones that would haunt her for the rest of her life. And now, 5 drunk soldiers were calling her a fraud. Sarah took a deep breath. She could walk away. That would be the smart thing to do, the professional thing, but something in her chest burned hot. These men didn't just insult her. They insulted every woman who'd ever fought to prove herself. They insulted her unit, her teammates, her sacrifice. Morrison watched Sarah approach with a smug grin on his face. His friends nudged each other, anticipating a show. The restaurant remained silent, tension thick in the air. "Let me guess," Morrison said, leaning back in his chair. "You want to prove yourself, show us what you've got." Sarah stopped a few feet from their table. Her posture was relaxed, her hands at her sides. "No," she said quietly. "I want to give you a chance to apologize." This brought another round of laughter from the table. The stocky soldier with the crew cut stood up fully now. His name tag identified him as Jackson. "Apologize," Jackson snorted. "For what? Telling the truth." Sarah's expression didn't change. "For disrespecting my unit. For disrespecting every SEAL who earned that trident through blood and sweat. And for assuming you know anything about who I am or what I've done." Morrison stood up too, now flanked by Jackson. The other three soldiers remained seated but watched with eager eyes. Morrison was tall, maybe 6'2", and outweighed Sarah by at least 70 pounds. "Listen, honey," Morrison said, stepping closer. "I'm sure you're very proud of whatever participation trophy program you completed, but real operators don't need to announce themselves. They don't need to defend their credentials. Everyone just knows." "You're right," Sarah said. "Real operators don't need to announce themselves." Morrison looked confused for a moment, unsure if he'd won the argument or walked into something. Sarah continued, her voice steady. "Real operators also don't sit in bars getting drunk and talking trash about units they don't understand. Real operators show respect to other service members, regardless of branch or specialty." Jackson stepped forward, trying to intimidate her with his size. "You've got a mouth on you. Maybe somebody should teach you some manners." The restaurant owner, an older veteran named Tom, moved toward the phone behind the bar. Maria, the hostess, looked terrified. Several other diners had their phones out, likely ready to call 911. Sarah remained calm. "I'm going to make you all an offer, a one-time offer." Morrison crossed his arms. "Oh yeah, what's that?" "I'll prove I earned my trident, right here, right now. If I succeed, you apologize, not just to me but to every person in this restaurant. You admit you were wrong." The five soldiers exchanged glances. Morrison's grin grew wider. "And if you fail?" "I won't fail," Sarah said simply. Jackson laughed. "Okay, I'll bite. How exactly are you going to prove anything?" "You want to arm wrestle?" "No," Sarah said. She pointed to the parking lot visible through the window. "Out there, 45 seconds, that's all I need." Morrison looked delighted. 45 seconds to do what? "To put all five of you on the ground." The silence that followed was absolute. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Morrison threw his head back and laughed so hard he had to grab the table for support. "You," he gasped between laughs, "you're going to take on all five of us, in 45 seconds." Sarah nodded once. "That's the offer." Jackson shook his head in disbelief. "Lady, I don't know what you've been smoking, but there's no way." "Are you accepting or not?" Sarah interrupted. "Or are you afraid?" That did it. Morrison's face flushed red. Pride and alcohol were a dangerous combination, and Sarah knew it. She was counting on it. "Oh, we accept," Morrison said. "But when we embarrass you out there, you admit that you don't belong in the SEALs. You take off that pin and hand it over." Sarah felt a surge of anger but kept it locked down. "Deal, let's go." The soldiers stood up, all five of them now. They were excited, anticipating an easy victory. Tom, the restaurant owner, hurried around the bar. "Folks, I can't let you fight in my parking lot. I'll have to call the police." Sarah turned to him. "Tom, I promise you nobody's going to get hurt. Not seriously anyway, just give us 2 minutes. If it looks bad, make the call." Tom studied her face, seeing something there that made him pause. He'd been a Marine in Vietnam. He knew a warrior when he saw one. Finally, he nodded slowly. 2 minutes, then I'm calling." The group moved outside, other diners following to watch. Word spread quickly. and soon the parking lot had an audience of about 30 people. The 5 soldiers spread out in a rough semicircle facing Sarah. Morrison pulled off his uniform jacket, tossing it to one of his friends. "Last chance to back out, sweetheart." Sarah removed her own jacket, folding it carefully and handing it to Maria, who had followed them outside. Underneath, Sarah wore a standard navy t-shirt. Her arms were lean and muscular, but she still looked small compared to the 5 men facing her. Someone in the crowd shouted, "Don't do this, call the police." But Sarah ignored them. She checked her watch, then looked up at Morrison. "Whenever you're ready," she said. Morrison glanced at his friends, sharing one last confident grin. Then he charged. Morrison came at Sarah like a linebacker, expecting to overwhelm her with size and strength. It was exactly what she'd anticipated. Men like him always relied on their physical advantages. They never expected technique, speed, or years of training designed specifically to neutralize larger opponents. Sarah waited until Morrison was 3 feet away. Then she moved. She stepped to the side at the last possible second, using Morrison's own momentum against him. As he stumbled past her, she grabbed his extended arm, twisted it at the elbow, and used a joint lock that sent him crashing face first into the pavement. The entire movement took less than 2 seconds. The crowd gasped. Jackson and another soldier named Peters rushed her simultaneously from different angles. Sarah dropped low, sweeping Peters' legs out from under him with a precision kick to the knee. As he went down, she rose up and drove her elbow into Jackson's solar plexus, knocking the wind out of him. He collapsed, gasping for air. 12 seconds had elapsed. The remaining 2 soldiers, whose name tags read Williams and Torres, approached more cautiously now. They just watched their 3 friends go down in less than 15 seconds. The alcohol-fueled confidence had evaporated, replaced by genuine concern. But pride wouldn't let them back down, not in front of a crowd. Williams feinted left, trying to draw Sarah's attention while Torres came in from the right. It was a basic tactic, one Sarah had countered hundreds of times in training. She waited for Torres to commit, then she spun inside his guard, using a hip throw that sent his 200-pound frame flying through the air. He landed hard on his back, the impact forcing all the air from his lungs. Williams grabbed for her from behind, managing to get his arms around her waist. He was strong, his grip tight. For a moment, it looked like he might actually restrain her. Sarah drove her heel down onto his instep with all her weight, then snapped her head back into his nose. She felt cartilage crunch. Williams' grip loosened immediately, and Sarah spun free, delivering a palm strike to his chin that sent him staggering backward into a parked car. 28 seconds. Morrison had recovered and was getting to his feet, blood dripping from his nose where he'd hit the pavement. Rage and embarrassment burned in his eyes. He'd started this confrontation, and he'd been the first to fall. His ego couldn't take it. He came at Sarah again, this time throwing wild punches. She blocked them easily, redirecting his energy, making him work harder while she barely broke a sweat. After the 5th missed punch, she stepped inside his guard and executed a perfect judo throw, sending him back to the ground even harder than before. Jackson had recovered his breath and came at her from behind. Sarah heard his footsteps, timed her move, and dropped to one knee. Jackson tripped over her, tumbling forward. As he tried to catch himself, Sarah was already behind him, applying a blood choke that cut off circulation to his brain. 5 seconds later, he was unconscious. She lowered him gently to the ground. Torres and Peters were back on their feet now, both limping. They looked at each other, then at Sarah, then at their 3 friends on the ground. Williams was leaning against the car, holding his nose. Morrison was on his hands and knees, trying to catch his breath. Jackson was unconscious. Sarah checked her watch. 42 seconds. Peters raised his hands in surrender. Okay, we're done. Torres nodded quickly, backing away. We give up. Sarah straightened her t-shirt and walked over to where Maria held her uniform jacket. The crowd stood in stunned silence, processing what they'd just witnessed. 5 soldiers, all of them larger and stronger than Sarah, had been completely overwhelmed in less than 45 seconds. Sarah put her jacket back on, buttoning it carefully. Then she walked back to where Morrison was finally getting to his feet. His face was scraped and bleeding, his pride shattered. "You owe me an apology," Sarah said quietly. Morrison looked at her, all the arrogance gone. He opened his mouth, closed it, then looked away. The other soldiers gathered around him, all of them bruised and humiliated. Finally Morrison spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." "Louder," Sarah said, "and to everyone here." Morrison's jaw clenched, but he knew he had no choice. He'd made the bet, he'd lost. He turned to face the crowd of onlookers. "I'm sorry," he said, louder now. "We were wrong. We were disrespectful. We had no right to question Lieutenant Chen's credentials or her service." The other 4 soldiers nodded, echoing similar apologies. They looked like they wanted the parking lot to open up and swallow them whole. Sarah studied them for a long moment. Part of her wanted to grind their humiliation deeper, to make them feel every bit of disrespect they'd shown her. But she was better than that. She'd made her point. "Apology accepted," she said. "Now go home, sober up, and tomorrow think about whether you want to be the kind of soldiers who tear others down or the kind who lift everyone up." The 5 soldiers didn't need to be told twice. They gathered their things and headed for their vehicle, moving like beaten dogs. The crowd watched them go, then turned their attention back to Sarah. Suddenly someone started clapping. Then another person joined in. Within seconds the entire crowd was applauding, some whistling and cheering. Sarah felt her cheeks flush. This was exactly the kind of attention she'd hoped to avoid. Tom, the restaurant owner, pushed through the crowd with a huge grin on his face. "Lieutenant Chen, your dinner tonight is on the house. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen." "Thank you, Tom, but that's not necessary." "I insist, and I think everyone here would agree. You just taught those boys a lesson they'll never forget." More applause. Sarah nodded, accepting the praise with as much grace as she could manage. But inside she felt conflicted. She'd won the confrontation, proven her point, defended her honor. So why did she feel so unsettled? Sarah sat alone in her booth, the plate of food in front of her untouched. The crowd had dispersed, most of the diners returning to their own meals, though many kept glancing her way with expressions of awe and respect. Her phone buzzed continuously with text messages. Word of the parking lot incident was already spreading. Maria approached the table cautiously. "Lieutenant Chen, there's someone here to see you." Sarah looked up to see a tall man in his 50s wearing a Navy uniform with captain's bars. She recognized him immediately. Captain James Reeves was the commanding officer of her SEAL team. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't good. "Captain," Sarah said, standing and saluting. Reeves returned the salute, then gestured for her to sit. "At ease, Lieutenant. Mind if I join you?" "Of course not, sir." Reeves sat down across from her, his expression unreadable. He was a career Navy man, with nearly 30 years of service and a reputation for being fair but demanding. Sarah respected him greatly, which made this moment even more uncomfortable. "I received several phone calls in the last 20 minutes, Reeves said. "Apparently, one of my officers was involved in an altercation outside this establishment. An altercation that was filmed by multiple witnesses and is currently making the rounds on social media." Sarah's heart sank. "Sir, I can explain." Reeves held up his hand. "I've seen the videos, Lieutenant, all of them, from multiple angles, very thorough documentation." "Sir, those soldiers were drunk and disorderly, disrespectful, and completely out of line," Reeves finished. "I know. I've also made some calls. Those 5 soldiers belong to an Army unit stationed at Fort Campbell. Their commanding officer is a friend of mine. He's not happy. Neither am I. Sarah felt her throat tighten. She defended herself and her unit, but she'd also used force against other service members. There would be consequences. There always were. I accept full responsibility for my actions, sir. Reeves studied her for a long moment. Lieutenant Chen, do you know why I'm not happy? Because I engaged in a physical confrontation that reflects poorly on the unit. No, Reeves said. I'm not happy because you put yourself in a position where you felt you had to prove something. You're one of the finest operators I've ever had the privilege of commanding. You've completed missions that most of those drunk idiots couldn't even imagine. You've saved lives. You've served with distinction. And yet, you felt you needed to fight 5 soldiers in a parking lot to earn respect. The words hit Sarah harder than any punch could have. She looked down at her hands, feeling the weight of truth in what her captain was saying. That tells me something is wrong, Reeves continued. Not with you, but with the environment you're working in. The fact that this happened at all means we've failed you somehow. Sarah looked up surprised. Sir, you haven't failed me. Haven't I? Have any of us created a culture where female operators feel valued and respected without having to constantly prove themselves? Or have we just opened the door and expected you to fight for every inch of ground? Sarah didn't know how to answer. She thought about the past 8 years of her career, the countless times she'd been questioned, doubted, tested beyond what her male counterparts faced, the whispers in the hallways, the jokes she was supposed to laugh at, the assumption that she'd gotten special treatment, that the standards had been lowered, that she didn't really belong. Sir, it's complicated. It shouldn't be, Reeves said firmly. You earned your place. You've proven it 1,000 times over. The fact that you still face this kind of disrespect is unacceptable. He pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. It displayed a video of the parking lot fight filmed from someone's phone. The caption read, "Female Navy SEAL destroys 5 Army soldiers in under a minute. Respect." This video has been viewed over 2 million times in the last hour, Reeves said. The comments are overwhelmingly supportive of you. People are inspired. Young women are seeing what's possible. Veterans are defending your honor. This is turning into a moment, Lieutenant. Sarah felt overwhelmed. I didn't want this kind of attention. I know you didn't. But sometimes, the moments that matter most are the ones we don't choose. Now, here's what's going to happen. The Army is conducting an investigation into those 5 soldiers. They'll face disciplinary action for conduct unbecoming. You will not face any charges because you acted in self-defense and adhered to proportional force. Multiple witnesses confirm that you warned them, gave them opportunities to back down, and only engaged when they physically attacked you. Sarah felt a wave of relief. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, there's more. Tomorrow morning there's a press conference scheduled at the base. The Navy wants to address this incident publicly. They want you there. A press conference, Sarah's stomach churned. Sir, I really don't. I know, but this is bigger than you now. The Navy is facing criticism about how it treats female service members. This is an opportunity to address that, to show that we support our people. And Lieutenant, whether you like it or not, you've become a symbol. Sarah closed her eyes. This was her nightmare. She joined the Navy to serve, to be part of something bigger than herself, to work as part of a team. She'd never wanted to be singled out, to be made into a poster child or a symbol. But Reeves was right. The moment had chosen her. The press conference room at Naval Base Coronado was packed with reporters, cameras, and military brass. Sarah stood backstage, her palms sweaty, her heart racing. She'd faced enemy fire in combat zones with less anxiety than she felt right now. Captain Reeves stood beside her, reviewing notes. Remember, just tell the truth, speak from the heart. You don't need to perform or prove anything, just be yourself. That's easier said than done, sir. I know, but you've got this, Lieutenant. A Navy public affairs officer appeared at the door. "We're ready for you, Captain Reeves, Lieutenant Chen." They walked out onto the stage together. The bright camera lights were blinding. Sarah took her seat next to the podium, keeping her back straight and her expression neutral, the way she'd been trained. Reeves stepped up to the microphone. "Good morning. Thank you all for coming. Yesterday evening, an incident occurred involving Lieutenant Sarah Chen and 5 Army soldiers. I'm here to address that incident and to provide context." He spent the next 5 minutes outlining the facts: the soldiers' disrespectful behavior, Sarah's attempt to de-escalate, the challenge issued and accepted, and the outcome. He was clear and factual, letting the events speak for themselves. Lieutenant Chen acted with restraint and professionalism, Reeves concluded. She used the minimum force necessary to defend herself and to uphold the honor of her unit. The 5 soldiers involved have been disciplined by their command, and now I'd like Lieutenant Chen to share her own perspective. Sarah stood and approached the microphone. Every camera in the room focused on her. She could see reporters leaning forward, eager to catch her words. This was the moment where she could speak for herself, tell her story, make a statement that would be heard around the world. She cleared her throat. "My name is Lieutenant Sarah Chen. I've served in the United States Navy for 12 years. 8 of those years have been as a Navy SEAL. Yesterday, I was confronted by 5 soldiers who questioned my credentials and disrespected my unit. In that moment, I made a choice to defend my honor and the honor of every person who's earned the SEAL Trident." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But here's what I want you to understand. What happened yesterday wasn't about me being special or extraordinary. It was about training and preparation. Every Navy SEAL, male or female, goes through the same brutal selection process. We endure Hell Week together. We learn the same skills. We hold each other to the same standards. What I did in that parking lot isn't unique to me. Any one of my teammates could have done the same thing." A reporter raised her hand. "Lieutenant Chen, do you face this kind of discrimination often?" Sarah considered the question. "Yes, not every day, but often enough. There are people who believe women don't belong in combat roles, that we're a liability, that we can't meet the standards. I've spent my entire career proving otherwise. But yesterday made me realize something. I shouldn't have to keep proving it." "Can you elaborate on that?" another reporter asked. "I've completed the same training as every other SEAL. I've served in combat. I've been wounded in action. I've received commendations for valor. My record speaks for itself. And yet, I'm still questioned in ways my male counterparts never are. Yesterday was just the most public example." Reeves nodded approvingly from his seat. Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I never have. What I'm asking for is equal respect. Judge me by my actions, my service, my sacrifice, not by assumptions about what women can or can't do." A male reporter in the front row stood up. "Lieutenant, some people are saying you overreacted, that you could have just walked away." Sarah met his eyes. "I could have walked away. I've walked away hundreds of times before. But those soldiers didn't just insult me. They insulted every woman in uniform, every person who's ever faced discrimination while serving their country. At some point, walking away becomes acceptance. It becomes permission for that behavior to continue." "So you don't regret it?" "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that in 2026 we're still having this conversation. But no, I don't regret standing up for myself and my unit." The questions continued for another 20 minutes. Sarah answered each one honestly, refusing to hide behind military jargon or public relations talking points. She spoke about the challenges female service members face. She talked about the importance of holding everyone to the same high standards. She emphasized that diversity makes the military stronger, not weaker. When the press conference ended, Sarah felt drained but also lighter. She'd said what needed to be said. Whether it changed anything remained to be seen, but at least she'd tried. Back in Reeves' office, he poured them both coffee. "You did well out there, Lieutenant." "Thank you, sir. What happens now?" "Now you go back to work. Your team needs you. We have a mission briefing next week." Sarah nodded, relieved. Work was what she wanted. Work was where she belonged. But Reeves wasn't finished. "However, I should tell you that the Commandant of the Navy has been watching this situation closely. He was impressed by how you handled yourself, both in the parking lot and at the press conference. He's asked me to inform you that you're being considered for early promotion to lieutenant commander." Sarah's eyes widened. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes. You've earned it. Not because of yesterday, but because of 12 years of exemplary service." 3 months later, Sarah stood in formation as the promotion ceremony concluded. Her new rank insignia gleamed on her uniform. Her parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Her teammates stood at attention, respect clear in their eyes. After the ceremony, an older woman approached her. She looked to be in her 70s, with gray hair and kind eyes. "Lieutenant Commander Chen, I'm Margaret Torres. My granddaughter is 16 years old. She watched your press conference 3 months ago. Since then, she's been running every morning, training, preparing. She wants to be a Navy SEAL just like you." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "That's wonderful." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "When I was her age, girls weren't allowed to dream those kinds of dreams. My daughter's generation opened some doors. But you're showing my granddaughter that she can do anything. That strength isn't about size or gender. It's about courage and dedication." "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job." "No," Margaret said firmly. "You're doing much more than that. You're changing the world, one 45-second fight at a time." As Sarah drove home that evening, she thought about Morrison and those 5 soldiers. She'd heard through the grapevine that they'd all written her formal letters of apology, that they'd been disciplined but not discharged, given a chance to learn from their mistakes. She hoped they had. The parking lot fight had gone viral, seen by millions. But what mattered most to Sarah wasn't the views or the fame. It was the messages she'd received from young women all over the country, girls who'd never considered military service before, women who'd been told they weren't strong enough or tough enough. They'd seen her stand up. They'd seen her refuse to back down. They'd seen her prove that respect is earned through action, through dedication, through the courage to be exactly who you are, regardless of what others think. And in the end, that was worth more than any rank, any medal, or any moment of viral fame. Sarah Chen had spent her entire career trying not to stand out. But sometimes, the greatest service you can provide is showing others what's possible. Sometimes, you have to stand alone so that others know they can stand too. 45 seconds in a parking lot had changed everything. Not because she'd won a fight, but because she'd won something far more important: the right to be seen, to be heard, and to be respected for exactly who she was.